welcome to our second image critique. This time we're going to have a look at a portrait image. So a few weeks ago, I put out a casting call or a model call for a family portrait or a photo shoot with a child to help train up an assistant for the studio. And I had a reply from a lady who had a young girl who was really into America's Next Top Model and those kinds of shows. And they came along to the shoot and she was so full of character. And she did such a good job with all of her poses. She took direction really well. She was up for all of the ideas that we had. They brought loads of different outfits. And these are some of the photos from the shoot. So we're going to have a look through and we're going to give them some critique. These are some of the shots that I took, just for clarity. Yeah, let's have a look. So this first photo has a lot of character. Yeah, so we've got this real fun pose. It's framed symmetrically. So we've got the same amount of space here as we do here. I don't know if you can see the mouse on the screen recording, but essentially where you have your framing, if you have the same amount of space left and right, what we call open and even spaces, it can sometimes be useful when you frame your subject that way, so they're not too close to one edge of the frame, and especially when they're looking straight on at you. This is quite a powerful way to compose your image. Now, if you match that space left and right with the space above the head, again, it just helps them fit in the frame nicely. And that's what we have with this picture. Now, what could be better? So there's always room for improvement, and it's really good to be able to analyze your work as a photographer. Now, for me in this picture, I love the glasses. I love how they're fun, but I think the lenses are just a little bit too dark. I'd like them to be semi-transparent, or maybe like a rose color, something like that, so we can still see her eyes. If we wanted to be really picky, we could come in and we could clone out some of the stray hairs around the top of her head. But because they don't catch the light too much, they're not too distracting. I'm not too worried about cloning those out. Now, what else could we do? Now, generally for pictures of children, especially fun shots like this, they'd be more brightly lit, more kind of vibrant and bold. So for this shot, we could have combined the pink sunglasses with a pink top or a brighter top, and maybe a bolder color background as well, to make the whole theme of the shot bright, bold, and fun. And the photo itself is nice and sharp. That's always a good consideration. The settings used, see if I can get the settings to come up. There we go. I think I found the tab. Yeah, I have. Cool. Okay, so this photo was taken at 1/200th of a second. So fast enough to freeze the movement of a relatively still subject. Now, obviously, she's a child and she was having fun and she was moving a lot, which is why I bumped it up from what I would usually use, which is 1/125th of a second, up to 1/200th of a second. Now, the ISO is at 50, and that's going to give me a really good quality photo. And my aperture is at 7.1. Now, I was fairly far back from her. I was probably about 3 meters away, which means with the lens I was using, which was a 24-70mm, I could still get a good depth of field using 7.1. So all of her is in focus, which is what your aperture value does. So the higher this number, the more I have in focus. So this shot, so I really enjoy doing these shots where you've got your subject in the studio and you kind of want to get some natural, happy, smiley shots. Now, the way to do that is to do something fun. So play a game or do something silly and then just take photos of that happening. So for this shot, we did like a hair swoosh. So she would face one way and then I'd count her down, 3, 2, 1, and then she'd spin, and then we'd get the shot as she spun. And it always takes a few goes, but it's always really good fun and you always get a nice natural shot. Now, the only thing about this is because it's not as posed as she's spinning and she's thinking more about spinning, you can't really give her too much direction. So if we look at the hand here, it's kind of in like a bit of a strange, unnatural shape because she's thinking about spinning. Okay, so I'm not going to say to her, I'll make sure you put your foot here and make sure your hands are like this and then turn your head and then look here and then do this with your mouth. It's just too much for a kid. These shots are kind of more spontaneous, they're more fun, and you just go with it. Okay, so this is our hair swoosh shot. And the lighting we use is kind of like a corridor of light. So we've got the main light over here on the right hand side, nice big soft box lighting her from one side, giving the shadow going off behind. And then we've got a bit of a graduation of light on the background as well. So it's not all just one color. There's a little bit more of an interest in terms of the light on the background. Now, when we have a look at the settings again, same as before. So I didn't change my settings in between shot, didn't really need to. And we've still got a nice clear shot. So when we look at the framing, so she's quite close to the bottom of the picture here. So ideally what I'd want to have is a bit more space, and I could quite easily take that into Photoshop and just expand it down using generative fill. Does a really good job, but I haven't done that. There's a fair amount of space to the left, a fair amount of space to the right. So this kind of shot where you've got your subject moving, you're doing something fun, it's always better to leave more space so you can crop in a little bit later, just in case they fling their arm out or their leg goes a bit too close to the edge. You can then crop in later if you need to, but it's just going to give you enough space to not crop anything out, any limbs out accidentally when you're shooting. So this next shot I'm about to show you, this was just her free posing, which is always nice to do because you get so much personality when they do their free posing. So this was her getting her model pose on. She stuck one hip out to the side. She put her hand on her hip. She's looked dead at the camera. She was really confident face. And it was just so her. Like, I'd only met her this one time, but you could just tell from her energy, like this was as comfortable as she gets. And she was just really sassy and just had loads of fun. So this pose, yeah, just really kind of shows her personality. So the reason that I've cropped it like this, so she's looking dead on to the camera. So our eye is going to look straight to her face as our focal point. And then she's arching her back and giving us this curve, and she's facing this way. Now, when you have a person face, a person could be a person, could be a dog. When you have something, person, dog, animal, facing one way, it's best to leave more space to the side that they're facing than to the side behind them. And that's because you can then imagine them walking into that space, looking at whatever it is in front of them. It's just a more comfortable way to view an image. Now, for this shot, I have positioned her quite far to one side. And one of the reasons that I often do this when I shoot is because if I get somebody who comes into the studio and they want shots for their business or for like professional reasons, they could then add text to this area for like a business card. Or if she wanted to get into modeling as a child model, they could pop her details in here and use this picture as a background. So having a bit of negative space in that way can be effective. If you were to position like a noughts and crosses grid over the picture, where the points intersect, so where your lines intersect, is a good place to position your subject. What else can we say? So she's nice and sharp. This is a web version, so it's a little pixelated, but she's definitely sharp. We've got a nice, so the colors that we have here kind of work well together. You've got the gray background, a lighter gray top, and then this kind of darker green color as well. So they all kind of work together. There's no one color that's drawing your eye to a specific part of the shot. So we have a look at our settings. Probably the same settings as before, I imagine. Oh, 5.6 this time. So that's 5.6. So you wouldn't have as much in focus for a depth of field, but you can't really see much of a difference. So obviously our positioning was such that it got her all sharp anyway. 1/250th of a second. So nice and quick to freeze the movement. And again, an ISO of 50. So it's a really good quality shot. We could tidy her hair up a little bit if we wanted to. It just depends on your personal preference. I know some people like to keep hair messy, especially if like this is part of her and it's part of her personality. If she often has messy hair, the mums might be like, you know, that's her, exactly. That's what we wanted. We don't want it to be all smooth and tidy. So you can kind of gauge that. You could ask the parents, you know, would you like me to tidy her hair up in Photoshop? Or if that's your style and you always do that, then I would do it every shoot. But if you're unsure, you could ask the parents. So let's have a look at this one. So I don't think this one is strong as the other shots. And that's because we were kind of just getting started in this one. So her smile is a little bit unsure. And it's really important to have a look at the expression of your subjects when you shoot. Now, I have seen in the past people posting photos that they're really happy with, where the model, and this tends to be with older models or women, where they've kind of like half blinked, but the photographer thinks it looks seductive or sultry or something like that, when actually it just looks like they're blinking. So it's really important to make sure that the expression is communicating what you want it to do. So it's not always going to be smiley and happy. Sometimes it might be slightly uneasy or unsure, or I don't really trust this person yet because this is like the first few shots and I kind of need to relax into it. So don't expect your first few shots that you take to be as characterful or as smiley as you would want them. You kind of have to warm your subjects up a little bit. So the other thing that we could say about this shot is if we wanted a bit more consistency in the colors, we could have used red hairbands to go with the outfit. Our framing, so we have a fair amount of space around her. Now, the space on the right hand side is probably a little too much for my liking, so I could crop it into about here. Now she is facing into that bit where it is wider, but because of the pose, she's kind of more, her arms are kind of more straight on and she's looking more kind of, she's actually looking more to our left, her right. So we don't need all that extra space the other side of her. So we could crop down a little bit. The other thing about this one is her feet were a little bit dirty. So I have tried to tidy them up a little bit, but it could be a little bit brighter on her foot here. Now, it's always good to make sure that the face is the brightest part of an image when you take a portrait, because that's where we want our viewer's eye to go. And the face should always be sharp as well. We should always have a catch light. So if you consider the eye as a clock face, there should always be a reflection of your light. Essentially, that's what a catch light is, from anywhere between 10 to and 10 past. Now, ideally, it will be 5 to on the hour or 5 past for a nice light on your subject's face. Okay, and that's going to ensure that we don't have any long nose shadows coming across the face or down here. We're going to have a nice light on the subject's face. And this is for if you want a flattering portrait. Okay, you can, you know, you could side light somebody if you wanted it to be really dramatic, or you can uplight them if you were doing like a Halloween kind of pose. It's all depending on the mood, the context that you're trying to get in your shot. Now, for kids, usually you'd have one light to the left, one light to the right, and you're just going to give them the same amount of light on either side, usually, because when they look this way or they look this way, it doesn't matter because their face is still going to be nicely lit. So making your life easier, especially if you're working with kids that you've not met before and you don't know how much energy they're going to have or how well they're going to listen to you, making things easier by having two big bright light sources, one to your left, one to your right, lighting them, is going to really make your life easier. Now you have to put them at the right height so that those catch lights fall in the right place in their eye. So here where she's lying on the ground, I would have brought those lights down. Okay, when she was stood back up, those lights would be higher. So that is a consideration. We look at the settings again. We're at 5.6, 1200 and ISO 50. Okay, so same as before. And she is nice and sharp, although this is the web file again, so we've got a little bit of pixelation coming in where it's low res. Thanks for watching our portrait critique. I hope you found this helpful and you've picked up some tips that you can use in your photography. If you've liked our critique, please can you share it with your friends, comment what you thought, and subscribe to our channel. I'll see you soon.